I need you to understand something, Zara, Uncle David said, his hands shaking around his whiskey glass. I never wanted it to come to this. Zara looked up from her laptop, where she'd been working on a translation project due tomorrow. The rain hammered against the windows of their small Itaewon apartment. Something in her uncle's voice made her stomach drop. She'd heard that tone before, 16 years ago, when he told her that her parents weren't coming back from Seoul. Come to what? She asked carefully. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Instead, he stared at the amber liquid in his glass like it held answers. I owe money. A lot of money. To very dangerous people. This wasn't news. Uncle David always owed money. Gambling debts, failed business ventures, loans from the wrong people. Zara had been covering his rent for the past 6 months with her translator salary. How much? She asked, already doing calculations in her head. Maybe she could pick up extra work, weekend projects. 400 million won. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Zara's laptop slipped from her lap. 400 million won. Nearly $350,000. That was impossible. That was. I don't have it, David continued, his voice hollow. They're coming tomorrow. And if I don't pay. He finally looked at her, and what Zara saw in his eyes made her blood turn to ice. Not fear for himself. Something worse. Calculation. But they've offered me a solution. What solution? Zara's voice came out as a whisper. Uncle David took a long drink, draining his glass. When he spoke again, his words were almost casual, as if he were discussing the weather. They said they'll forgive the entire debt if I give them you. The world stopped. What? Zara stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. What are you talking about? There are people who pay for girls like you. Foreign, young, educated. They hold private auctions. The debt collectors said if I bring you tomorrow night, everything I owe disappears. They've already found buyers who are interested. Zara backed away, her mind refusing to process what she was hearing. You're joking. This is some sick joke. I'm not joking. David poured another glass with steady hands. Too steady. I've already agreed. They're coming for you at midnight. The room tilted. Zara gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. This man, who had taken her in when her parents died, who had raised her for 16 years, who she called family, was telling her he'd sold her. Actually sold her. Like she was furniture, like she was property to liquidate. You can't, she whispered. Uncle, please. I'll help you find another way. I'll take out loans, I'll work more jobs. There is no other way. His voice was flat, final. The decision is made. Something broke inside Zara then. Not her spirit, but her illusions. Every memory reframed itself in an instant. The times he'd called her difficult. The way he'd always reminded her that he'd taken her in when no one else would. How he'd made her feel like a burden, like something he was doing out of obligation rather than love. She'd thought it was complicated family dynamics. She'd been wrong. She'd never been family to him. She'd been an asset. And now she was collateral. I won't go, she said, her voice stronger now. You can't make me. David finally showed emotion. Anger twisted his features. You think you have a choice? You think running will help? These people will find you. And when they do, they'll take you anyway and they'll hurt me for your defiance. At least this way, you're doing something useful for once in your ungrateful life. There it was. The truth he'd been hiding behind fake kindness for 16 years. She was useful. That's all she'd ever been. Zara's hands clenched into fists. She wanted to scream, to fight, to smash that whiskey glass into his lying face. But a cold clarity settled over her instead. Running wouldn't work. Fighting him wouldn't work. These loan sharks knew where she worked, where she lived, probably where she banked. If she ran, they'd find her. And if they had to hunt her down, it would be worse. She had 6 hours until midnight. 6 hours to decide not whether to escape, but how to face what was coming. Because one thing became crystal clear in that moment. She would survive this. And when she did, Uncle David would learn what it meant to betray Zara Okafor. Fine, she said quietly. Too quietly. David looked up, surprised. If that's what you want, I won't fight it. Relief flooded his face. You're being smart. This is the smart thing. Get out of my sight, Zara interrupted, her voice like ice. You have 6 hours before they come. Enjoy your whiskey. Celebrate your freedom from debt. But understand this. I will never forgive you. And if I survive whatever hell you're sending me to, you will regret the day you decided I was worth less than your gambling habit. David opened his mouth, closed it, then grabbed his bottle and left the room. The door to his bedroom slammed shut. Zara stood alone in the living room, shaking with rage and terror and something else. Something cold and sharp that felt almost like power. She walked to the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. Dark brown skin, natural hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her mother's Korean eyes, her father's Nigerian features. 24 years old. A translator who spoke 4 languages. A woman who'd spent her whole life trying to fit into spaces that didn't quite want her. She thought about her parents. Her mother, who'd fallen in love with a Nigerian student at Seoul National University. Her father, who'd learned Korean to proposal to her in her native language. They'd been so happy in the few memories Zara had. They'd taught her to be proud of both her heritages, to stand tall when people stared, to know her worth even when the world questioned it. What would they think of her now? About to be sold like cattle because their daughter had trusted the wrong person? No. Zara straightened her spine. Her parents had taught her to survive. They'd taught her to be strong. She would not dishonor their memory by breaking now. She spent the next 6 hours preparing. Not to run, but to remember. She wrote down everything. Uncle David's full name, his favorite gambling dens, the loan sharks he owed, every detail she could recall. She encrypted the file and emailed it to herself on 3 different accounts. Then she packed a small bag with identification, what little money she had, and a photograph of her parents. At 11:45, she heard the cars pull up outside. Heavy footsteps in the hallway. A knock on the door. Uncle David emerged from his room, looking older somehow, but his eyes were dry. He'd made his peace with what he was doing. Zara had not. She opened the door herself. 3 men stood there, dressed in black suits that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. They looked at her with empty eyes, like she was a package to be delivered. Zara Okafor? One of them asked in Korean. Yes. Come with us. Don't make this difficult. She looked back at Uncle David one last time. He couldn't meet her eyes. Good. She wanted him to live with that shame. Wanted it to eat at him every single day. Goodbye, Uncle, she said softly. I hope your freedom is worth it. Then she walked out into the rain, into the dark, into whatever nightmare waited for her. But she walked with her head high, her shoulders back, her mother's strength and her father's pride burning in her chest. They could take her body, but they would never take her soul. That belonged to her alone. The men led her to a black van. She climbed in without resistance. No point in fighting now. Save your strength, a voice in her head whispered. Her father's voice. Save your strength for when it matters. The drive took 40 minutes. They wound through Seoul's streets, moving away from the bright lights of the city center into industrial areas she didn't recognize. The men didn't speak. One of them played on his phone. Another smoked, even though the van was enclosed. Zara watched Seoul pass by the tinted windows and memorized every turn, every landmark. If she survived, she'd need to know where they'd taken her. Finally, the van stopped. When the doors opened, Zara saw a warehouse. Old, abandoned, the kind of place where terrible things happened and no one heard you scream. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she forced her breathing to stay steady. Panic would kill her faster than these men would. They pulled her out. Her feet hit concrete. The warehouse loomed before her like a mouth ready to swallow her whole. And that's when she heard it. Voices. Male voices. Dozens of them. Move, one of the men said, pushing her forward. The warehouse doors opened, and Zara stepped into a nightmare that would change her life forever. The interior was lit by harsh fluorescent lights that turned everything sickly and pale. And there, in the center of the vast concrete space, was a wooden platform. Like a stage. And around it, in a semicircle, stood at least 40 men. Business suits, casual clothes, expensive watches glinting under the lights. They turned to look at her as she entered, and their eyes made her skin crawl. Hunger. Greed. Assessment. She wasn't a person to them. She was merchandise. An older man with silver hair and a scar running down his left cheek stepped onto the platform. He held a microphone and his voice boomed through the space. Gentlemen, welcome. Tonight we have something special. 24 years old, fluent in Korean, English, Igbo, and French. Educated. Clean. And as you can see, quite exotic. Zara's stomach turned. Exotic. They always used that word. Like she was a pet. Like being different made her valuable in the worst possible way. The men began to move closer, circling like sharks. Some whispered to each other. Others just stared, their gazes traveling over her body in a way that made her want to scrub her skin raw. We'll start the bidding at 50 million won, the auctioneer announced. 50 million. The casual way he said it made Zara's head spin. She was worth 50 million won to start. More than Uncle David's entire debt. He could have paid them with her and had money left over. But he'd chosen the easiest path. The cruelest one. 60 million, someone called out. 70. 80 million won. The bids came faster. Zara felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. This was Seoul in the 21st century, not some historical drama. Things like this didn't happen. But they were happening. To her. 100 million. A fat man in an expensive suit said, licking his lips as he stared at her. Zara's hands shook. She clenched them into fists, digging her nails into her palms. The pain kept her present, kept her from dissociating completely. 120. 130 million. 150. The numbers climbed. Zara's worth calculated in currency, in how much pleasure these men thought they could extract from her body, her fear, her pain. She wanted to vomit, wanted to scream, wanted to fight every single person in this room. But she didn't, because something inside her whispered, wait, survive this moment. Your time will come. 200 million won, someone shouted from the back. The crowd murmured. 200 million was serious money. The auctioneer smiled, sensing the feeding frenzy. 200 million won. Do I hear 220? This is a rare opportunity, gentlemen. You won't find another like her. Zara closed her eyes, tried to go somewhere else in her mind, tried to remember her mother's smile, her father's laugh, anything good and pure and far from this place. And then the warehouse doors opened. Not burst open, not crashed open, just opened, smooth and controlled. The sound echoed through the space, and every head turned. The bidding stopped. Even the auctioneer fell silent. A man walked in, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his black suit perfectly. His face was beautiful in a way that was almost cruel. Sharp jawline, high cheekbones, dark eyes that swept across the room with casual disinterest, as if everyone present was beneath his notice. His hair was styled back, revealing features that belonged in magazines. But there was nothing soft about him. He moved like violence wrapped in silk, like a blade hidden in expensive fabric. The crowd parted for him automatically. Men who'd been shouting bids moments ago now pressed back against the walls, their faces pale. Some actually bowed their heads as he passed. Zara watched, transfixed, as the stranger walked toward the platform like he owned not just the warehouse but the entire city. "Who the hell are you?" the auctioneer demanded, though his voice had lost its earlier confidence. The man didn't even glance at him. His eyes had found Zara, and for a moment, just a heartbeat, something flickered in those dark depths. Then it was gone, smoothed over with perfect indifference. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep and quiet, but it carried through the warehouse like a command. "I'm here to bid. The bidding is at 200 million, the auctioneer said nervously. "If you want her, you'll have to. 500 million won. Cash. Now." The warehouse exploded into whispers. 500 million. That was insane. That was more than most of these men made in years. For one girl? Zara stared at him, confusion cutting through her terror. Who was he? Why would anyone pay that much? The auctioneer's face had gone white. "Sir, that's over $400,000 for one. Are you questioning my bid?" The man's voice didn't rise, didn't change tone, but the auctioneer actually took a step back. "No, of course not. I just need to verify that you can actually. My name is Jin Seok-ho." The reaction was immediate and electric. Men gasped. Some actually stumbled backward. The fat businessman who'd been leering at Zara looked like he might faint. Even the auctioneer seemed to forget how to breathe. Jin Seok-ho. Zara didn't know that name, but clearly everyone else did. And they were terrified of it. "Mr. Jin," the auctioneer whispered, "we didn't know you were interested in tonight's merchandise. If we had known, we would have arranged a private sale." "Release her," Jin interrupted, his tone suggesting he was already bored with the conversation. "Now!" Two men rushed forward, nearly tripping over themselves to comply. They untied Zara's hands, which she only now realized had been bound behind her back. When had that happened? The whole night was becoming a blur of horror and unreality. Her legs buckled as soon as she was free. She expected to hit the concrete floor. Instead, strong arms caught her. She looked up into Jin Seok-ho's face. So close now she could see the individual lashes framing those impossibly dark eyes. This close, she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtle. cedar and something else. Something that made her think of winter nights and dangerous promises. Can you walk? He asked. Zara tried to find her voice. Failed. Tried again. I think so. Try. He released her, and she swayed but managed to stay upright. Her wrists were raw where the ropes had cut into them, and her shoulders screamed from being pulled back for so long. But she was standing. That had to count for something. Jin Seok-ho shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The silk lining was warm from his body heat, and it smelled like him. Like safety, though that was absurd. This man was clearly dangerous. Everyone's reaction had told her that much. The payment will be transferred within the hour, Jin told the auctioneer. Then to Zara, come. It wasn't a request. He turned and walked toward the exit, clearly expecting her to follow. Zara glanced back at the crowd of men, all of them watching her with expressions ranging from envy to fear to something that looked almost like pity. She didn't want their pity. She didn't want anything from them except to never see them again. She followed Jin Seok-ho into the night. The car waiting outside was exactly what Zara would have expected from a man who just casually spent 500 million won on a human being. Black, sleek, expensive, with tinted windows that probably cost more than most people's entire vehicles. A driver in a black suit opened the rear door. Jin gestured for Zara to enter first. She hesitated, every instinct screaming that getting into this car was a terrible idea. But what choice did she have? Go back inside to those animals? Run into the Seoul night with no money, no phone, and nowhere to go? Would you prefer to go back inside? Jin asked mildly, as if reading her thoughts. Zara got in the car. The interior smelled like leather and luxury. The seats were heated, warming her body, which had started shaking from shock and cold. Jin slid in beside her, and the driver closed the door, sealing them in a bubble of silence. The car pulled away from the warehouse, navigating through dark streets Zara didn't recognize. She stared out the window, watching Seoul slide past. Each familiar landmark was a reminder that her city had betrayed her tonight. Her home had become her prison. Her family had become her jailer. And now this stranger, this dangerous man, owned her. Actually owned her. What's your name? Zara jumped at the sound of Jin's voice. He was watching her, his expression unreadable in the dim light filtering through the windows. Zara, she whispered. Zara Okafor. Okafor. Nigerian. My father was. My mother was Korean. But I'm Korean. I've lived here since I was 8. This is my home. Your Korean is perfect. No accent. Thank you. It came out as a question. She had no idea what was happening, where they were going, what he wanted from her. The not knowing was almost worse than the auction itself. Jin seemed to read her mind again. You're wondering why I bought you. The thought had crossed my mind, along with approximately 1,000 other terrified thoughts. Was that amusement that flickered across his face? It was gone too fast to tell. You have spirit. I like that. I'm so glad my personality meets with your approval, since you own me now apparently. This time she was certain she saw his lips twitch. Legally, yes. I paid for you. You belong to me. The words should have terrified her. Instead, they made her angry. Anger was better than fear. Anger gave her strength. I'm not a possession. I'm a human being. In that warehouse, you were merchandise, Jin said quietly. Here, in my car, you're something different. And what's that? He paused, considering. Let's say you're an investment. An investment in what? That remains to be seen. Zara studied him in the darkness. Jin Seok-ho. The name had caused panic in that warehouse, which meant he was someone important in Seoul's underworld. Dangerous, powerful, and he'd just spent an astronomical sum to buy her. But he hadn't hurt her. Hadn't even touched her except to keep her from falling. His jacket was still draped over her shoulders like a shield. Are you going to hurt me? She asked quietly. He turned to look at her fully, and in the passing streetlights, his eyes were unreadable. That depends entirely on you. On me. On whether you're smart enough to follow the rules. And what are the rules? Jin's smile was slow and cold, like ice forming over water. Rule 1, you belong to me now. Your life is mine. Your choices are mine. You go where I say when I say. You do what I tell you to do. Always. Zara's hands clenched in her lap. And if I refuse? Rule 2, refusal is not an option. Disobedience will be punished. Swiftly. Severely. He leaned closer and Zara's breath caught. But I'm not a monster, Zara Okafor. Follow the rules, and you'll find I can be quite reasonable. Reasonable? She echoed flatly. You just bought a human being at an auction, and you think you're reasonable? I saved you from being bought by someone much worse. Did you see those men? Do you understand what they would have done to you? His voice was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made his words more terrifying. Compared to that fate, I am the very definition of reasonable. He had a point. Zara hated that he had a point, but she couldn't deny it. Those men had looked at her like she was meat to be consumed. Jin looked at her like she was a puzzle, a problem to be solved. Neither was good, but one was definitely worse. Where are you taking me? She asked. Home. My home. Where you'll live from now on. I have an apartment in Itaewon. I have a life. A job at a translation company. Had, Jin interrupted. Past tense. That life is over. Your uncle sold you. The moment money changed hands, Zara Okafor ceased to exist in the official world. The truth of his words hit her like a physical blow. Uncle David had sold her. Actually sold her. And in doing so, he'd erased her entire existence. No one would be looking for her. Her co-workers would probably think she'd quit. Her landlord would clear out her apartment when the rent went unpaid. She had no friends close enough to notice her disappearance. Uncle David had made sure of that over the years, isolating her, making her dependent on him. She'd been so easy to erase. The realization made her want to scream. I want to see him, Zara said suddenly. My uncle. I want to look him in the eyes and ask him why. No. You said you're reasonable. I am, which is why I'm saying no. If you see your uncle, you'll do something stupid. You'll try to hurt him, or worse, forgive him. Either way would be a waste of your time. Jin shifted, crossing one long leg over the other. Besides, your uncle has already left Korea. He took the money he earned from selling you and boarded a flight to Las Vegas 3 hours ago. Zara felt tears burning behind her eyes. He's gone. He's gone, Jin confirmed. But let me offer you some comfort. He won't enjoy his freedom long. Men who sell their own family members tend to make other poor decisions. He'll gamble away the money, fall into debt again, and this time, no one will save him. And I'm supposed to feel better about that? I don't particularly care how you feel about it. I'm simply stating facts. The car turned onto a quieter street, the lights of central Seoul growing brighter through the windows. They were heading into Gangnam now, the wealthy heart of the city. Of course, men like Jin didn't live anywhere but the best neighborhoods. We're almost there, Jin said. Before we arrive, let me make something clear. He reached out, and Zara flinched, but he simply lifted her chin with one finger, forcing her to meet his eyes. You're mine now, Zara Okafor. Every breath you take, every word you speak, every thought in that pretty head mine. Fight me and you'll lose. Obey me and you'll have everything you could want. Protection, security, luxury. Choose wisely. His finger left her chin, and he turned away as if the conversation was over. As if he hadn't just told her that her entire life now belonged to him. Zara stared at his profile, at the sharp lines of his face illuminated by passing lights, and wondered if she'd been saved from the auction only to be delivered into the hands of something far more dangerous. A beautiful monster who spoke in gentle tones and smiled with cold eyes. Jin Seok-ho, whoever he was. Her new owner. The car pulled up to a building that made Zara's breath catch despite everything. It was one of the luxury high-rises in Gangnam, all glass and steel, the kind of place she'd walked past 100 times and never dreamed of entering. The lobby alone probably cost more than everything she'd owned in her entire life. Let's go, Jin said, exiting the car. Zara followed on shaky legs. His jacket was still draped over her shoulders, absurdly large on her frame. The doorman bowed deeply as they approached, his face carefully neutral even though Zara must have looked like a disaster. Bleeding wrists, torn clothes, eyes swollen from crying. The elevator was mirrored gold, and Zara caught sight of herself. She looked like a ghost. Like someone who died and hadn't realized it yet. Jin pressed the button for the top floor. Of course. Men like him didn't live anywhere but the top. The elevator opened directly into his penthouse. Not into a hallway. Into the apartment itself. Zara stepped out onto marble floors so polished she could see her reflection. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Seoul. The city spread out like a blanket of stars. The furniture was modern and minimalist. All clean lines and expensive materials. Art hung on the walls. Not prints. Originals. Paintings that probably cost millions. Your room is this way, Jin said, walking down a hallway. Zara followed, taking in more luxury with each step. The hallway alone was bigger than her entire apartment had been. He stopped at a door, opened it, and gestured for her to enter. The bedroom was enormous. A king-sized bed dominated the space, covered in silk sheets that probably had a higher thread count than her entire wardrobe. More windows offered views of the city. An ensuite bathroom was visible through an open door, all marble and gold fixtures. There are clothes in the closet, Jin said. They should fit. Shower. Change. Tend to your wounds. Someone will bring dinner in an hour. You're leaving me alone? He raised an eyebrow. Should I stay? Would you prefer I help you shower? Heat flooded Zara's face. No. I just thought. I don't know what I thought. The door locks from the inside if that makes you feel safer. Though I should tell you there's nowhere to run. We're 40 floors up, and my men are stationed throughout the building. Any attempt to escape will be unpleasant. He delivered this information in the same tone someone might use to describe the weather. Rest. We'll talk more tomorrow. He left, closing the door behind him. Zara stood frozen for a long moment, then rushed forward and tried the lock. It worked. She was alone. Trapped 40 floors above Seoul, but alone. She made her way to the bathroom, and what she saw in the mirror made her gasp. Her face was bruised, her lips split, her wrists raw and bleeding. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She looked like a victim, and the sight made rage kindle in her chest. Victim. That's what Uncle David had turned her into. That's what those men at the auction had seen. A victim to be used and discarded. But Zara Okafor had survived her parents' death. She'd survived growing up in a country where she was always different, always other. She'd survived Uncle David's casual cruelty for 16 years. She would survive this too. The shower was heaven. Zara stood under water hot enough to hurt, watching the grime and tears wash away. She found expensive soaps and shampoos, used them liberally, scrubbing until her skin was pink. In the cabinet, she found a first aid kit and bandaged her wrists carefully. The closet, as promised, contained clothes. Women's clothes. And they were new, tags still attached. Dresses, pants, shirts, all in her size. Had Jin known he was going to that auction tonight? Had he prepared for her specifically? The thought sent chills down her spine. She chose simple black leggings and an oversized cream sweater, comfortable and warm. By the time she emerged from the bedroom, food had indeed arrived. Set up on a table by the windows. A feast of Korean dishes that made her stomach growl despite everything. Jin was standing by the windows, staring out at the city, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He'd removed his tie and rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing forearms roped with muscle. He looked more human like this. Less like a statue carved from ice. Eat, he said without turning around. You need your strength. Zara approached the table slowly. Are you going to join me? I've eaten. So you're just going to watch me eat? That's not creepy at all. This time she definitely saw his lips twitch. You have a mouth on you. My mouth is one of the few things that's still mine, apparently. Jin finally turned to face her, and in the soft lighting of the apartment, he was almost unbearably handsome. It made Zara angry. Monsters shouldn't be beautiful. Sit. Eat. I won't bite. That's not particularly reassuring. But she sat, and once she started eating, she couldn't stop. She hadn't realized how hungry she was, how long it had been since she'd eaten. The food was incredible. Bulgogi, kimchi, jjigae banchan. Dishes spread across the table like an offering. Jin watched her for a moment, then moved to sit across from her, his whiskey glass cradled in one elegant hand. Tell me about yourself, he said. Zara looked up from her food. Why does it matter? Humor me. She considered refusing, but what was the point? What do you want to know? Everything. Start from the beginning. So she did. She told him about her parents. The accident. Uncle David taking her in. She told him about learning Korean, about being the only black girl in her school, about the stares and whispers and occasional cruelty. She told him about her love of languages, her job at the translation company, her small apartment in Itaewon that she'd been so proud of because it was hers. She told him about her life. And Jin listened in silence, those black eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he took a slow sip of whiskey. You've had a difficult life. I've had a life. Now I apparently don't. Now you have a different life. He set down his glass. One where you won't have to worry about rent or money or safety. Except freedom. Freedom is overrated. He stood, moving to the window again. Do you know what freedom gave you, Zara? It gave you an uncle who sold you to pay gambling debts. It gave you a job that barely paid enough to survive. It gave you a small apartment in a neighborhood where you weren't entirely safe. Some freedom. Zara's hands clenched around her chopsticks. It was my freedom, mine to choose. And now you have a different one, infinitely more comfortable. A gilded cage is still a cage. Jin turned to look at her, and something in his expression had shifted. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Tears. Begging. Fear. He tilted his head, studying her. You're afraid. I can see it in your eyes. But you're angry too. Angry at your uncle, at the men who bid on you, at me. You're angry at the whole world. Shouldn't I be? Yes, he said quietly. You should be. Anger will serve you better than fear in my world. If you're still here, you're feeling every word just like Zara. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for the next part, and tell me in the comments, do you think Jin is protecting her or just controlling her? Your thoughts might just shape how this story unfolds next. Your world, Zara echoed. The name Jin Seok-ho. Everyone at that auction knew it. They were terrified of you. With good reason. Are you going to tell me what you do? I think you can guess. She could. Organized crime, obviously. Probably drugs, weapons, gambling, all the traditional vices. Money laundering, maybe extortion. The kind of things that destroyed lives while making men like Jin rich beyond measure. Why did you buy me? She asked. The truth. Jin was silent for a long moment, his profile sharp against the glittering backdrop of Seoul. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it yet. Because when I looked at you tied to that platform, surrounded by wolves, I saw something I recognized. What? He turned to face her fully, and in his eyes, she saw something unexpected. Something that looked almost like pain. Someone who'd been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect them. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning Zara couldn't quite grasp. Before she could respond, Jin's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his face went cold. I have to go. Business. At this hour? My business doesn't keep regular hours. He moved toward the door, then paused. Don't wait up. And Zara, don't try to leave. I meant what I said about my men. They have orders to stop you by any means necessary. Even killing me? That would be a waste of 500 million won. That slight smile again. I said stop you, not kill you. There are many things worse than death. Sleep well. He left, and Zara was alone in the penthouse 40 floors above Seoul. A prisoner in paradise. She moved to the windows, pressing her hand against the cold glass, and looked out at the city she'd once called home. Somewhere out there, Uncle David was on a plane to Vegas, celebrating his newfound wealth. Somewhere out there, her co-workers were probably wondering why she hadn't come to work. And here, in this golden cage, Zara had to figure out how to survive. No, not just survive. She had to figure out how to escape, how to reclaim her life, how to make everyone who'd hurt her pay. Starting with the beautiful monster who'd bought her. Jin Seok-ho thought he owned her. He thought she was his possession, his investment, his property. He was wrong. Zara Okafor belonged to no one but herself. And she would prove it. Somehow. Zara woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and momentary confusion about where she was. Then memory crashed back like a wave, and she sat up abruptly, heart pounding. The penthouse. Jin. The auction. It hadn't been a nightmare. A soft knock on the door made her jump. Miss Okafor, a woman's voice polite and professional. I've brought breakfast. Zara grabbed a robe from the bathroom, silk, of course, probably worth more than her entire wardrobe had been, and opened the door cautiously. The woman was middle-aged Korean, dressed in a neat black uniform that screamed household staff. She carried a tray laden with food and smiled warmly, as if serving breakfast to a prisoner was perfectly normal. Good morning, Miss Okafor. I'm Mrs. Yoon, the housekeeper. Mr. Jin asked me to take care of you. She entered the room and set the tray on a small table by the window. I've prepared a traditional breakfast, but if you prefer Western food, I can make that instead. This is fine. Thank you. Zara watched as Mrs. Yoon efficiently arranged the dishes. Rice, soup, grilled fish, kimchi banchan. Where is Jin? Mr. Jin left early this morning for a business meeting. He said to tell you he'll return this evening. Mrs. Yoon straightened, folding her hands primly. If you need anything at all, just press the button by your bed. I'll come immediately. Mrs. Yoon, can I ask you something? Of course, Mississippi. Do you know why I'm here? What I am to Jin. Mrs. Yoon's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Understanding? Sympathy? I don't ask questions about Mr. Jin's business, Miss Okafor. I've worked for him for 5 years, and I've learned that his decisions, while sometimes unconventional, are always calculated. That's not an answer. No, Mrs. Yoon agreed gently. It's not. Eat your breakfast, Mississippi. You'll need your strength. She left before Zara could ask anything else. Alone again, Zara ate mechanically, her mind racing. She needed information about Jin, about his organization, about what he actually wanted from her. And she needed a phone. After breakfast, Zara explored her prison. The bedroom door was unlocked, and she ventured into the penthouse proper. It was even more impressive in daylight. All open space and modern design. Art on every wall. Furniture that belonged in magazines. The kitchen was industrial, equipped for a professional chef. The living room could have hosted 50 people comfortably. And everywhere, there were signs of Jin's presence. A laptop on the dining table. Papers scattered across a desk in what looked like a home office. Photographs on a shelf. But when Zara moved closer to examine them, she found they were all landscapes. No family photos. No pictures of friends or lovers. Just empty, beautiful places. Who was Jin Seok-ho really? She found a study lined with bookshelves. To her surprise, many of the books were in English. Classic literature, philosophy, history. One shelf held Korean poetry. Another contained books on military strategy, including Sun Tzu's The Art of War. A criminal who read poetry. A monster who appreciated art. The contradictions made her head hurt. Miss Okafor. Zara spun around to find Mrs. Yoon in the doorway, holding a shopping bag. Mr. Jin asked me to give you this. He said you'd need a phone to avoid going insane from boredom. Mrs. Yoon handed over the bag with a smile. He also said to tell you it's monitored, so don't bother trying to call the police. Inside the bag was the latest iPhone, already set up and charged. When Zara unlocked it, she found it had no contacts saved except one. Jin Seok-ho. Of course. Mrs. Yoon, how long have other women lived here before me? The housekeeper's smile faded. There have been no other women, Miss Okafor. You're the first. The first? Mr. Jin doesn't bring women to his home. Ever. You're, Mrs. Yoon paused, choosing her words carefully. You're something different. Before Zara could process that information, the phone in her hand buzzed. A text from Jin. How are you settling in? Zara's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She typed and deleted several responses before finally settling on. I'm a prisoner. How do you think I'm settling in? The response came immediately. A prisoner with a penthouse, designer clothes, and a personal housekeeper. If this is prison, most people would happily be incarcerated. Most people aren't being held against their will. Technically, I saved you. If you want, I can take you back to that warehouse. I'm sure those men would be happy to renegotiate. Zara's hands clenched around the phone. She typed furiously. You're in. I'm aware. Doesn't change the situation. Dinner at 7. Dress nicely. We're having guests. I don't want to have dinner with your criminal friends. I don't recall asking what you want. 7 p.m. Don't be late. The conversation ended. Zara resisted the urge to throw the phone across the room. Barely. Mrs. Yoon cleared her throat. If you need help choosing an outfit, miss, I'd be happy to assist. At 6:45, Zara examined herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Mrs. Yoon had helped her choose a dress, deep emerald green that hugged her curves and fell to mid-thigh. Elegant but not overly revealing. Her natural hair was styled in elaborate braids that fell past her shoulders, woven with gold thread that caught the light. Makeup enhanced her features without being overdone. She looked beautiful. She looked like she belonged in this world of luxury and danger. The realization made her stomach turn. You look lovely, miss, Mrs. Yoon said warmly. Mr. Jin will be pleased. I don't care about pleasing him. Of course not. But Mrs. Yoon's smile suggested she didn't believe that for a second. At exactly 7, the elevator dinged. Zara's heart began to race as voices filled the penthouse. Male voices, speaking in Korean too rapid for her to fully catch. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and left the bedroom. The living room had been transformed. The dining table was set for 6. Crystal and china gleaming under soft lighting. And standing by the windows were 5 men in expensive suits. They turned as she entered, and their reactions were varied. Surprise. Curiosity. Assessment. And from one, a flash of something that looked like disgust. Jin stood among them, and when his eyes landed on her, something flickered across his face. Approval? Possession? Whatever it was made heat crawl up her neck. Gentlemen, Jin said smoothly, this is Zara Okafor. She'll be joining us for dinner. One of the men, younger, maybe early 30s, stepped forward with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Okafor. What an unexpected pleasure. We didn't know Boss Jin had acquired such exotic tastes. The word exotic landed like a slap. Zara felt her jaw clench, but before she could respond, Jin's voice cut through the room like ice. Careful, Miho. That's the last time you'll use that word in her presence. Or any word that suggests she's a curiosity rather than a person. Understood. Miho's smile vanished. He bowed his head. Of course, boss. My apologies, Miss Okafor. Jin gestured to the table. Shall we eat? Dinner was a surreal experience. The food was exquisite, prepared by what was clearly a professional chef. The conversation flowed in Korean and occasionally English, revolving around business that was clearly criminal but spoken about in euphemisms. Shipments, territories, negotiations, percentages. Zara remained mostly silent, observing. These were Jin's lieutenants, she realized. His inner circle. And they were all watching her, trying to figure out what she was to their boss. Property? Mistress? Something else? The man who'd called her exotic, Miho, kept shooting her looks throughout the meal. Not attraction. Something colder. Resentment, maybe. Like she was an insult to him somehow. Another man, older, with gray at his temples, seemed more curious. Miss Okafor, Jin tells us you're a translator. What languages do you speak? Korean, English, Igbo, and French, Zara answered. Impressive. And you grew up here in Seoul? Since I was 8. But your father was Nigerian? Yes. And he married a Korean woman. That must have been difficult in those days. Still is in some circles. His tone was neutral, but his eyes were sharp, assessing her. My parents loved each other, Zara said quietly. That was all that mattered to them. Love. Miho laughed, the sound ugly. How romantic. Tell me, Miss Okafor, do you love Boss Jin? Is that why you're here? The table went silent. Every eye turned to Zara. She felt Jin's gaze on her, heavy and unreadable. I'm here, Zara said carefully, because your boss bought me at an auction after my uncle sold me to pay his debts. Love has nothing to do with it. The silence deepened. Miho's face paled. The other men looked at Jin, clearly unsure how to react to such a blunt admission. Jin's expression didn't change. He took a slow sip of wine, then set down his glass. Zara is under my protection. What happened to her before she came here is irrelevant. What matters is that she's mine now. And anyone who forgets that will answer to me personally. The threat was clear. The men at the table shifted uncomfortably. All except one, a man who'd been silent throughout dinner. He was lean, intense, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. He studied Zara with an expression that looked almost like respect. You have courage, Miss Okafor, he said. Speaking so plainly about your circumstances. Most would hide behind pretty lies. I'm tired of lies, Zara said. My uncle lied to me for 16 years. Pretended he cared when all I was to him was a burden. And when it was convenient, he sold me. I won't waste energy pretending this, she gestured to the opulent penthouse, is anything other than what it is. A different kind of cage. Jin's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't contradict her. Instead, he stood. Gentlemen, dinner is finished. We'll continue our business discussion in my office. Zara, you're dismissed. Dismissed. Like a servant. Like property. Zara's hands clenched in her lap, but she stood gracefully, nodded to the table, and walked back to her room with her head high. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. But once alone, she leaned against the closed door and let out a shaking breath. She'd survived dinner. Barely. The way those men had looked at her, the casual way they discussed violence and crime, the knowledge that Jin commanded their absolute loyalty, it was overwhelming. She changed out of the dress and into comfortable clothes, then lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in this penthouse, Jin was conducting business. Planning whatever criminals planned. And she was here, trapped, waiting for him to decide what to do with her. The thought made her sick. If you're still here, you're hooked, admit it. Broken heart fire, what do you think Jin truly wants from Zara? Control, or something deeper? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, backhand index pointing down. I read every one. And if you want to see what happens next in this twisted, emotional billionaire story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss the next episode. Your support keeps this story alive, speech balloon red heart. Hours later, Zara heard the elevator. Voices fading. The men leaving. Then footsteps in the hallway. A soft knock on her door. Zara. Jin's voice. She considered not answering, but what was the point? She got up and opened the door. He stood there, still in his suit but with his tie loosened, looking tired in a way she hadn't seen before. Can I come in? It's your penthouse. It's your room. The distinction surprised her. She stepped back, and he entered, closing the door behind him. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Jin spoke. You were brave tonight. Foolish, but brave. Foolish. Miho is dangerous. Ambitious. He's been looking for any excuse to challenge my decisions. By admitting how you came to be here, you gave him ammunition. You mean by telling the truth? Truth is a weapon, Zara. In my world, it can get you killed. Then maybe I don't want to be part of your world. Jin moved closer, and Zara's breath caught. You don't have a choice. Not anymore. But I can teach you how to survive it. How to navigate it. How to become something other than a victim. And what would I become? His eyes searched hers. That's up to you. But I see potential in you. Fire. Intelligence. Strength you don't even know you have yet. You want to mold me into something useful for you. I want to help you become powerful enough that no one can ever hurt you again. The words hit something deep in Zara's chest. She wanted to reject them, to throw them back in his face. But a traitorous part of her whispered, what if he's right? What if power is the only thing that matters in a world that sees you as disposable? Why? She asked quietly. Why do you care? Jin's expression shifted, something raw flickering across his face before he locked it away. Because I know what it's like to be betrayed by family. To be sold. To be treated like property. He took a step back. Get some rest. Tomorrow, your real education begins. He left before she could ask what he meant. Zara stood alone in her room, heart pounding, mind racing. Jin Seok-ho was more complicated than she'd thought. And that made him infinitely more dangerous. Because monsters were easy to hate. But a man who'd been wounded the way she'd been wounded? A man who saw her pain because he carried his own? That was harder to resist. The next morning, everything changed. Zara was finishing breakfast when Jin appeared, dressed not in a suit but in athletic clothes. Black pants, a fitted shirt that showed off the lean muscle of his frame. Come with me, he said. Where? Training. Training for what? For survival. He led her to an elevator she hadn't noticed before, hidden behind what looked like a regular panel. It descended into the building's subterranean levels, opening into a private gym. Mats covered one section. Weight equipment filled another. And at the far end, behind a reinforced door, was a shooting range. A man was waiting for them. Lean, intense, probably late 30s, with the bearing of someone military trained. This is Captain Han, Jin said. He'll be your instructor. Captain Han bowed slightly. Miss Okafor. Mr. Jin has asked me to teach you self-defense, situational awareness, and basic combat skills. We'll start simple. Stance, balance, how to fall without injuring yourself. Zara looked between them. You're serious? Completely, Jin said. You're under my protection, but I won't always be there. You need to be able to protect yourself. And if I refuse, then you'll remain weak. And weak things don't survive long in my world. Jin's voice was matter of fact. Your choice. Zara thought about those men at dinner. Thought about Miho's resentful eyes. Thought about the warehouse, about being tied up while men bid on her like cattle. Thought about Uncle David and how easily he'd sold her because she'd been powerless to stop him. Teach me, she said. Captain Han smiled. Good. Let's begin. The first session was brutal. Han taught her how to stand, how to move, how to protect her center of gravity. Over and over, he corrected her stance, adjusted her posture, made her repeat basic movements until her muscles screamed. Zara's body, unused to this kind of physical demand, protested every motion. Jin watched from the sideline, arms folded, expression unreadable. Once, when Zara stumbled, he stepped forward and steadied her, his hands on her waist firm but not rough. Again, he said quietly. She went again. And again. And again. By the end of 2 hours, Zara was drenched in sweat, her muscles trembling, but she was still standing. Good, Han said, handing her a towel. You have natural balance. We'll build on that. Tomorrow, we start learning strikes. Zara nodded, too exhausted to speak. Jin approached, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. How do you feel? Like I've been hit by a truck. That ghost of a smile crossed his face. Good. Pain means you're learning. Rest today. We train again tomorrow morning. Over the following days, a routine established itself. Mornings were for training. Han pushed her hard, teaching her how to punch, how to kick, how to use an opponent's momentum against them. Jin was always there, watching, occasionally stepping in to demonstrate a technique or hold a practice pad for her to strike. Afternoons were quieter. Zara had free reign of the penthouse. She read from Jin's extensive library, discovering his taste in literature was surprisingly sophisticated. She practiced her languages, keeping her skills sharp. Mrs. Yoon brought meals and offered gentle conversation, carefully avoiding any topic that might be too personal. Evenings, Jin would return from whatever business occupied him. Sometimes they'd eat dinner together in charged silence. Sometimes he'd work in his study while she read in the living room, both of them occupying the same space, but maintaining careful distance. It was a strange existence. Part prisoner, part guest, part student. Zara couldn't quite figure out what she was to Jin, and she suspected he couldn't either. 2 weeks into her captivity, everything changed again. Zara was returning from training, muscles pleasantly sore, when she noticed something was wrong. The penthouse was too quiet. Mrs. Yoon usually had music playing softly in the kitchen. Today there was only silence. "Mrs. Yoon," Zara called out. No answer. Her instincts, sharpened by Han's training, screamed danger. She moved quietly through the penthouse, keeping close to walls, just like Han had taught her. Stay low. Use cover. Trust your gut. She found Mrs. Yoon in the kitchen, standing very still, her face pale. And behind her, holding a knife to her throat, was Miho. "There she is," Miho said, his voice pleasant despite the violence of the scene. The exotic pet. Boss Jin's new obsession. Zara's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "Let her go. She has nothing to do with whatever problem you have with me." "Oh, but she does. She serves you, cares for you," which makes her complicit in Boss Jin's mistake. Miho's eyes were cold, calculating. "You see, Miss Okafor, you're a problem. Boss Jin has gone soft since you arrived. Distracted. He's making poor decisions, showing weakness. And in our world, weakness gets you killed. So you're here to kill me? I'm here to send a message. That foreign women don't belong in our organization. That Boss Jin needs to remember where his loyalties should lie." Miho pressed the knife harder against Mrs. Yoon's throat, and a thin line of blood appeared. "And if I have to hurt this old woman to make that point, so be it." Something cold and clear settled over Zara. This was it. The moment Han had been training her for. Fight or die. Protect or surrender. She measured the distance between herself and Miho. 12 feet. Too far to close before he could hurt Mrs. Yoon. She needed him to move the knife. Needed him distracted. "You're right," Zara said, surprising even herself. "I don't belong here. I never asked for this. Jin bought me like property, and I hate him for it. I hate this penthouse, hate this life, hate everything about this world." She took a step forward. "So if you want to kill me, fine. But let Mrs. Yoon go first. She's innocent." Miho studied her, suspicion warring with satisfaction. "You hate Boss Jin? I despise him. He's a monster who thinks he saved me, when all he did was trap me." Another step forward. 10 feet now. "You want to hurt him? Help me escape. That'll hurt him more than my death." It was a gamble. A huge, dangerous gamble. But Miho's eyes lit up with interest. "Escape? I'm a prisoner here. You said it yourself, I don't belong. So let me go. Tell Jin I ran. That'll make him look weak and foolish." Miho's grip on Mrs. Yoon loosened slightly. "Boss Jin would hunt you down. Maybe. But by then, you'll have had time to consolidate power. Make your move against him. Another step. 8 feet. What's more valuable? My corpse or my escape?" Miho was considering it. Zara could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. And in that moment of distraction, she moved. Everything Han had taught her crystallized into action. She closed the distance in 3 running steps. Her hand shot out, striking Miho's wrist in exactly the spot Han had shown her, the nerve cluster that would make his fingers spasm. The knife clattered to the floor. Miho recovered fast, faster than she'd expected. His fist came up, aimed at her face. But Zara had learned how to slip punches. She ducked, felt the air move past her ear, and drove her elbow into his ribs. Not hard enough to break bones, she wasn't that strong yet, but hard enough to hurt. Miho stumbled back, surprise flickering across his face. "You." "I learned," Zara finished for him. "Now get out." But Miho wasn't done. He came at her again, and this time there was murder in his eyes. Zara blocked his first strike, countered with a kick to his knee that made him grunt. They traded blows, and Zara realized with shock that she was holding her own. Not winning, Miho was bigger, stronger, more experienced. But not losing either. Then footsteps thundered in the hallway. The elevator had opened. Jin burst into the kitchen, and the temperature in the room dropped to Arctic levels. "Miho," Jin said, his voice so cold it could freeze blood. "Step away from her. Now." Miho froze, clearly calculating his chances. Then he stepped back, hands raised. "Boss, I was just threatening my household staff. Attacking Zara. Planning a coup." Jin's words were precise, each one a nail in a coffin. "Did you think I didn't know? That I couldn't see your ambition rotting you from the inside? Boss, please. You're finished." Jin pulled out his phone, sent a single text. Within seconds, the elevator opened again. 3 men entered, the same type who'd driven Zara to the auction. "Enforcers. Take him. Let everyone know what happens to those who forget their place." The men grabbed Miho, who struggled briefly before going limp. As they dragged him toward the elevator, he looked at Zara with pure hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed. "Yes," Jin said quietly. "It is." The elevator doors closed. Silence filled the kitchen. Mrs. Yoon was crying softly, holding her throat where the knife had drawn blood. Jin moved to her first, his touch surprisingly gentle as he examined the wound. "It's shallow. You'll be fine. Take the rest of the day off. Actually, take the week. With full pay." "Thank you, Mr. Jin," Mrs. Yoon whispered. She glanced at Zara, something like awe in her eyes, then hurried out. Finally, Jin turned to Zara. She was shaking now, adrenaline draining away, leaving her weak and unsteady. He moved toward her slowly, like approaching a wild animal. "You fought him," he said. "Han taught me well. You protected Mrs. Yoon. She didn't deserve to be hurt because of me." Jin reached out and took her hand, turning it over to examine her knuckles. They were bruised, already swelling. His thumb brushed over them gently, and Zara felt a shiver run through her that had nothing to do with fear. "You could have been killed," Jin said, his voice rough. "But I wasn't." He looked up at her, and in his eyes was something she'd never seen before. Not just approval. Not just respect. Something deeper. Something that looked almost like wonder. "No, you weren't. Because you're stronger than I thought. Braver." His hand was still holding hers. Zara knew she should pull away, but she couldn't move. The air between them felt electric, charged with something dangerous and undeniable. "Jin," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for. He released her hand abruptly, stepping back. "You should rest. You've had enough excitement for one day." And just like that, the walls were back up. The distance restored. Zara nodded, suddenly exhausted, and made her way to her room. But as she closed the door, she glanced back and found Jin still standing in the kitchen, staring at the spot where she'd fought Miho, an unreadable expression on his face. Something had shifted between them. Something neither of them was ready to name. The days following Miho's removal were tense. Zara heard whispers from the staff, saw the way Jin's other men looked at her with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. The foreign girl who'd fought off an attacker. The woman boss Jin protected with terrifying ferocity. Training intensified. Han pushed her harder, teaching her knife defense, weapon retention, how to fight multiple opponents. Jin was there for every session now, not just observing but participating. He'd demonstrate techniques, sometimes using himself as her practice opponent. His hands on her body as he positioned her for throws and locks. His breath warm on her neck as he showed her weak points to exploit. The proximity was torture. Every touch felt like fire. Every moment close to him made Zara's heart race in ways that had nothing to do with fear. 3 weeks after the Miho incident, Jin took her to the shooting range. Captain Han had taught her the basics, but Jin wanted to assess her progress personally. He handed her a pistol, showed her how to load it, how to hold it properly. "Guns are a last resort," he said, standing behind her, his chest nearly touching her back. "But you need to know how to use one. In my world, hesitation gets you killed." Zara raised the weapon, aimed at the target downrange. Her hands trembled slightly. "Breathe," Jin murmured, his hands coming up to adjust her grip. "Don't fight the recoil. Let it flow through you. Like this." His hands covered hers, steadying her aim. Zara could feel the heat of him, the solid strength of his body supporting hers. Her breath caught. "Focus," Jin said, his voice dropping lower. "Everything else disappears. It's just you and the target. Nothing else matters." Zara squeezed the trigger. The gun kicked back, but Jin's hands held her steady. The bullet hit the target dead center. Again, they emptied the magazine together, Jin's hands guiding hers through each shot. By the end, Zara's grouping was tight, professional. She set down the gun with shaking hands. "You're a natural," Jin said, still standing close. Too close. Zara turned to face him, and suddenly they were inches apart. She could see the individual lashes framing his dark eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his skin. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back up. "Zara," he said, her name a warning or a prayer, she couldn't tell which. "Tell me something true," she whispered. "Just one true thing. Why did you really buy me?" Jin's jaw tightened. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because when I saw you on that platform, something in me recognized something in you. We're the same, you and I. Both betrayed. Both sold. Both survivors. You were sold. A long time ago. By my father, to pay a debt to another crime family. I was 12 years old." His voice was flat, emotionless, but his eyes burned. "They used me, trained me, turned me into a weapon. By the time I was 20, I'd killed 17 people. And when I finally earned my freedom, I swore no one would ever own me again." Zara's breath caught. "But you bought me. Made me property. I removed you from a worse fate. That's not the same thing. Isn't it? You own me, Jin. You control where I go, what I do, who I see. That's ownership. Then what would you have me do?" His voice rose slightly, frustration bleeding through his perfect control. "Set you free? Send you back out into a world where your uncle can sell you again? Where you'll always be vulnerable? Teach me not to be vulnerable. Give me the tools to protect myself, then let me choose." "And what would you choose?" Jin asked, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. Zara didn't know how to answer that. A month ago, she would have run without hesitation. Would have taken any opportunity to escape this golden cage. But now, after weeks of training, after seeing glimpses of the wounded man beneath Jin's cold exterior, after feeling the electricity that sparked between them every time they touched, she wasn't sure anymore. "I don't know," she admitted. Something flickered across Jin's face. "Disappointment? Relief? Then you're not ready to choose." He stepped back, and the loss of his proximity felt like a physical ache. "Come. We have somewhere to be." "Where?" "You'll see. If you're still watching, I know you're feeling that tension between Zara and Jin. The power, the danger, the spark that neither of them can deny. But before we dive into what happens next at the gala, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss the next explosive chapter in their story. And tell me in the comments, do you think Zara's falling for him, or just playing along to survive? Jin led her back to the penthouse, where Mrs. Yoon had laid out an evening gown. Black, elegant, with a slit up one thigh. "We're attending a charity gala tonight. Seoul's elite will be there. Politicians, businessmen, old money families. And you'll be at my side." Zara's stomach dropped. "As what? Your trophy? Your pet?" "As my partner." Jin's eyes met hers. "It's time Seoul's underworld learned that you're not just under my protection. You're someone to be reckoned with in your own right." An hour later, Zara descended from her room wearing the black gown, her hair styled in elegant twists, makeup applied with Mrs. Yoon's expert help. Jin waited by the elevator, and when he saw her, he went perfectly still. His eyes traveled over her slowly, and the heat in his gaze made her skin burn. "You look," he paused, seeming to search for words, devastating. "Is that a compliment?" "It's a fact." He offered his arm. "Ready?" "No. But let's go anyway." The gala was held at one of Seoul's most exclusive hotels, the ballroom glittering with crystal chandeliers and designer gowns. Zara felt every eye turn as they entered, Jin's hand resting possessively on the small of her back. Whispers followed them like a wave. "Is that Jin Seok-ho? Who's the woman with him? I've never seen him with anyone before." Jin guided her through the crowd with practiced ease, introducing her to politicians who smiled too widely, businessmen whose handshakes lasted too long, society women who looked her up and down with barely concealed disdain. Zara held her head high, using every ounce of composure she'd learned. She was Nigerian and Korean, black in a room full of people who probably had never spoken to someone who looked like her. She'd survived worse than their judgment. "Miss Okafor," a woman in diamonds approached, her smile sharp. "How exotic you are. Tell me, how did you and Mr. Jin meet?" There was that word again. Exotic. Like she was a rare bird in a cage. Zara felt Jin's hand tighten slightly on her back, a warning. But she didn't need his protection. "Not anymore. We met through business," Zara said smoothly. "I'm a translator. For languages." Mr. Jin values my skills. How fascinating. And you live here in Seoul. I was raised here. My mother was Korean. This is my home. The woman's smile faltered slightly, as if Zara claiming Korea as home was somehow offensive. Well, how lovely. She drifted away, and Jean leaned close to Zara's ear. Well handled. I've been dealing with people like her my whole life. They think I don't belong. I'm used to proving them wrong. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Don't I? I'm here on your arm. Your property, remember? Jin's jaw tightened. Zara. Mr. Jin. A man approached, older, distinguished, with the bearing of someone who'd held power for decades. I was hoping to speak with you privately. About our mutual interests in Busan. Of course. Zara, I'll be just a moment. Jean disappeared into the crowd with the man, leaving Zara alone. She made her way to the balcony, needing air, needing space away from the suffocating crowd. Seoul spread out below her, the city lights like stars fallen to earth. She thought about her parents, wondered what they'd think if they could see her now. Would they be proud? Horrified? Disappointed? Miss Okafor. Zara turned to find a young man, maybe her age, with kind eyes and an uncertain smile. I'm sorry to bother you. I just wanted to say that I think it's brave, what you're doing. Brave? Being here with Jin Seok-ho. Everyone knows what he is. What he does. But you stand beside him anyway, with your head high. That takes courage. Zara studied him. You have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe not. But I know that Seoul can be cruel to people who are different. I'm sure you've experienced that. And yet you're still here, still fighting. I admire that. He bowed slightly. I hope you find what you're looking for. He left before Zara could respond. She stood alone on the balcony, his words echoing in her mind. Fighting. Was that what she was doing? Or was she just surviving? And what was the difference? There you are. Jean appeared beside her, his presence filling the space. I've been looking for you. Needed air. Too many people in there who think they know who I am. And who are you, Zara Okafor? She turned to face him fully. The lights of the city cast his face in gold and shadow, making him look almost unreal. Beautiful and dangerous. I'm still figuring that out. And when you do, when you know who you are, what you want, what then? Then I make my choice. Jin's eyes searched hers. And will that choice include me? The question hung between them, loaded with everything they hadn't said, everything they'd both been avoiding. Zara's heart pounded. A month ago, the answer would have been simple. No. Never. But now? I don't know, she whispered. Ask me again when I'm not your property. Something shifted in Jin's expression. Pain, maybe. Or regret. Zara. His phone buzzed, cutting off whatever he was going to say. He checked it, and his face went cold. We need to leave. Now. What's wrong? Your uncle. He's back in Seoul. The drive back to the penthouse was tense and silent. Jin made calls in rapid Korean, his voice sharp with orders. Zara's mind raced. Uncle David was back. Why? What could he possibly want now? When they arrived, Jin's men were already there, surrounding the building. Captain Han met them in the lobby, his face grim. Boss. He's demanding to see her. Says he has information about the other families, about their plans. He'll only trade it for time with his niece. Jin's hand clenched into a fist. No. Jin, Zara said quietly. Let me see him. Absolutely not. He's using me as leverage. That means I'm the only one who can end this. She met his eyes. You said you wanted me to be powerful. Let me use that power. Jin stared at her for a long moment, conflict warring across his face. Finally, he nodded. Captain Han stays with you. And it happens here, in my territory, on my terms. Uncle David was brought to a private room in the building's lower level. When Zara entered with Captain Han at her side, she barely recognized him. He looked older, haggard, his expensive clothes rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. When he saw her, something like relief crossed his face. Zara. Thank God. I need your help. My help. Zara's voice was ice. You sold me. Erased my existence. Left me to die. And now you want my help. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I'm your family. I'm all you have left. You stopped being my family the moment you accepted money for my life. David's face crumpled. Please. I'm in trouble. Real trouble. The people in Vegas, they want me dead. I need Jin's protection. And you're the only one who can convince him. Zara stared at the man who'd raised her, who'd betrayed her, who'd sold her for his own convenience. A month ago, she might have felt something. Pity, maybe. or rage. But now she felt nothing. He was a stranger. Less than a stranger. He was a cautionary tale. You want to know what Jin taught me, uncle? Zara said quietly. He taught me that weak things don't survive. That power is the only currency that matters. That family is whoever stands beside you when the world tries to break you. She leaned forward. You were never my family. You were just the man who took me in because my mother's insurance money paid your debts. That's not true. I cared about you. You sold me. The words hung in the air, final and damning. David opened his mouth, closed it, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, Zara. I'll die if you don't help me. Zara stood, looked down at the broken man before her, and felt absolutely nothing. Then die. She turned and walked out, Captain Han following. Behind her, she heard David calling her name, begging, sobbing. She didn't look back. Jin was waiting in the hallway. What did you tell him? The truth. That he means nothing to me. That I owe him nothing. Zara met his eyes. What will you do with him? What do you want me to do? The question surprised her. Jin was giving her power, real power, over her uncle's fate. She could have him killed. Could have him tortured. Could make him pay for every moment of suffering he'd caused. Let him go, Zara said. He's already destroyed. Killing him would be mercy. Let him live with what he's done. Let the people he owes find him. Let him face the consequences of his choices. Jin studied her for a long moment, then nodded. It's done. He gestured to his men. Take him to the airport. One-way ticket to anywhere but here. If he ever returns to Seoul, he doesn't leave alive. The men dragged David away, still protesting, still begging. And Zara felt the last chain of her past life break and fall away. How do you feel? Jin asked. Free. The word surprised her, but it was true. She turned to face him fully. Jin, we need to talk. I know. They returned to the penthouse in silence. Once there, Zara changed out of the gown and into comfortable clothes. When she emerged, she found Jin on the balcony, staring out at Seoul, a glass of whiskey in his hand. I want to make you an offer, he said without turning around. An offer? A proposition. A way forward that doesn't involve ownership or cages. He finally looked at her. Stay with me. Not as property. As a partner. Equal in every way that matters. Help me run my organization. Use your languages, your intelligence, your strength. And in return, I give you everything I have. Money, power, protection, freedom. Zara's heart hammered. Why? Because over these past weeks, I've watched you transform. I've seen you go from terrified to dangerous. I've seen your strength, your courage, your refusal to break even when the world tried to crush you. Jin set down his glass and moved toward her. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as an investment and started seeing you as the most remarkable woman I've ever met. Jin, I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not even asking you to stay forever. I'm asking you to choose. Freely. With no coercion, no threats, no cages. He stopped in front of her, his eyes burning with intensity. Stay because you want to. Because you see the same potential in us that I do. Or leave. I'll give you money, a new identity, a fresh start anywhere in the world. The choice is yours, Zara. Truly yours. Zara looked at him, this beautiful monster who'd bought her and then given her the tools to become powerful. This wounded man who saw her pain because he carried his own. This criminal who'd somehow become the first person in her life to offer her real choice, real freedom. She thought about her parents, about their love that defied boundaries. She thought about the girl she'd been, small and scared and powerless. And she thought about the woman she'd become, strong and dangerous and free. If I stay, she said slowly, it's not because you bought me. It's not because I'm grateful. It's because I choose to. That's all I'm asking. And if I change my mind, if someday I want to leave, then I'll open the door and watch you walk through it. Even if it destroys me. The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability, broke something in Zara. Or maybe it built something. She wasn't sure anymore. All she knew was that for the first time since that terrible night when Uncle David sold her, she felt like herself. Powerful. Chosen. Free. Then I'll stay, she said. For now. As your partner. As your equal. As my equal, Jin repeated, and the relief in his voice was palpable. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her face, thumb brushing across her cheek. Zara Okafor. You are the most dangerous thing that's ever happened to me. Good, she whispered. You should be afraid of me. I am. Terrified. Then he kissed her, and it was nothing like that desperate moment weeks ago. This kiss was a promise, a partnership, an acknowledgement that they were both wounded, both dangerous, both choosing each other despite everything. When they finally pulled apart, Zara rested her forehead against his. What happens now? Now! Jin smiled, and it was real warm, transforming his face into something almost gentle. Now we show Seoul what happens when two people who refuse to break decide to stand together. I like the sound of that. 6 months later, Zara stood in a conference room surrounded by Jin's lieutenants, explaining her proposal for expanding their operations into African trade networks. She spoke in Korean, English, switching to French when needed, commanding the room with the same authority she'd learned to command her own life. The men who once looked at her with disdain now listened with respect, some even with fear. Good. Fear meant they wouldn't underestimate her. Fear meant they'd remember that she was not decoration, not a trophy, not a curiosity. She was power wrapped in brown skin and steel determination. Jin watched from the head of the table, his eyes warm with pride and something deeper. Something that looked a lot like love, though neither of them had said the word yet. They didn't need to. It was in every touch, every glance, every moment they chose each other. After the meeting, as they walked through Seoul's streets, Zara thought about how far she'd come. From the girl who'd been sold like property to the woman who now commanded respect in one of Seoul's most dangerous organizations. From victim to survivor to something more. Something powerful. Penny for your thoughts? Jin asked. Just thinking about revenge. Against your uncle? No. Against everyone who ever thought I was less than I am. Against everyone who saw my skin and assumed I didn't belong. Against everyone who thought being different made me weak. She smiled, sharp and satisfied. They were wrong. And now they know it. Jin pulled her close, kissed her temple. You are magnificent. I know, Zara said, and she meant it. Because Zara Okafor had learned the most important lesson of all. Power wasn't given. It was taken. And she had taken hers back with both hands, forged it in fire and pain and determination, and made it something beautiful and terrible and entirely her own. Seoul had tried to break her. Uncle David had tried to erase her. The world had tried to make her small. They had all failed. Because Zara Okafor belonged to no one but herself. And anyone who forgot that would learn, the way Miho learned, the way Uncle David learned, the way all her enemies would learn. She was not a victim. She was not a survivor. She was vengeance wrapped in silk and steel. She was power that refused to apologize. She was everything they feared she could be. And she was just getting started. If you've been captivated by Zara's journey from victim to victor, from powerless to powerful, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of transformation and triumph. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of choosing yourself, even when the world tries to choose for you. And drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from and what part of Zara's story resonated with you the most. Your engagement helps us bring you more powerful stories like this one. Until next time, remember, you are never as powerless as the world wants you to believe. The only cage that can truly hold you is the one you accept. Choose freedom. Choose power. Choose yourself.